What's up, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of the 5280 podcast on the MHRT Network. I am your host, Mundungus Greavy, alongside with my co-hosts, as always, Glenn Hauser, Gage Madrid, and Cameron Parker. Sorry for the late hour. I was running late because I got stuck at work, but we are joining it just a little bit late with all the great stuff that happened in the Broncos game. Before we kick everything off, how's everybody doing?
Doing good, man. Doing good.
Good. Yeah. What we'll do is we'll give it a Broncos effort tonight. The first half of the show will go great, and then the second half will tank.
We'll just all derail and go all to hell.
It'll just go off the rails, yeah.
Pretty much.
When does it not go off the rails?
Yeah.
Listen, I do my best.
I'm good. So I went to WWE SmackDown on Friday. And so we got the chance to see The Rock and Pat McAfee show up. Obviously, everybody knows, that they were there for College Game Day, and doesn't really need an introduction. But yeah, so it's just kind of cool to kind of see that. Yeah, it was great. I mean, I think the thing was, like, you already were kind of speculating it. One with Pat McAfee down there and with SmackDown. And then once you saw Pat McAfee, show up at SmackDown, it was like you easily put two and two together after what you just saw today. It was like, okay, something seems to be up. And then The Rock followed suit, like not even 10 minutes later. So it was kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we're going to start this off nice and simple. No big issues. But what about that bullshit no call on the pass interference on the two-point conversion?
We're really just diving into this now, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fast forward.
Ref ball, baby.
No, listen,
it should never have gotten to that point, but that was just absolutely a mugging. And it's interesting. Nick Ferguson has been on the case on this, and he actually was showing where P. Ryan was grabbed as well on that 2-point conversion. So, I mean, there was a lot that just completely got ignored. The refs that game did not do the Broncos any favors.
No. I mean,
you can be a fan of whatever team you want, but that was blatant.
Yeah, there were a lot of sketchy stuff, at least from calls that weren't, Gage and I talked about it before the show, but it was like, we'll talk about the certain play, but there was the Russell Wilson fumble where he was actually face masked. There was another play where it seemed where he did get face masked. So I mean, it was all game. It wasn't just like the pass interference penalties or anything like that. It was just there were just bad calls all across the board.
Okay. Second point. Who are we getting feedback from?
I think it's Glenn, because he's the only one that doesn't have headphones.
Get with the times, man.
I'm not hearing anything on my end here. Let me exit out.
And it's definitely Glenn. All right, Gage.
Yes.
Give me what you got.
Oh man, that was just incredibly egregious no call, man. And I don't even know if you can make the excuse that it was a perspective where an official couldn't see it. It was pretty clear where the down the line judge could have seen that pretty clearly, man. It's just, Sean Payton has talked about this before, how it feels like the officials have kind of been out to get Sean Payton ever since Bountygate, and this could be another example of that. I mean, but then by that same token, we also saw another bad missed pass interference in last night's Browns-Steelers game. So, yep. I mean, that it's just an epidemic that's been plaguing the league for quite a while now. And quite frankly, I don't know what the hell the solution is. I really don't. And it pisses me off.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, and I think the thing is, like, you never want to pin it on, the penalties. Like, you want to try and be objective as much as you can, but it's like,
absolutely.
Like, it's just so frustrating because it's like, just when you consistently see some of the sketchiness happen in Broncos games, it does make you wonder, like, that's not the first sketchy pass interference penalty we've seen happened on Cortland Sutton, right? Like that's like not the first time we've seen that. I guess Sutton is just susceptible to pass interference penalties just not called. I mean, there was a phantom pass interference that was called, on Sutton in the Kansas City Chiefs game. And of course, there's the one that we saw, in the end zone. And it's just like, how do you not call that? I mean, Glenn mentioned it earlier, but it's like, he was riding his back like it was a ride at the fair. I mean, it was just like dead obvious what he was doing, and they just never really called it.
And it felt like he got there almost 2 full seconds before the ball did. Like you could count 1, 2, literally. Like there was plenty of time for the damn official to see it. There's no excuse.
I feel like if he was mic'd up, you would have heard him go whee as he jumped on the back for a piggyback ride.
Yeah, when you hear Gene Steratore actually say, he said it twice. So like he said it on a clip, that was done, I think, during the game, but he also did it on the 33rd team because the 33rd team shared it, where he actually explained, that it was pretty egregious what was going on, with that call. And yeah, it definitely should have been called. So when like a head of officiating is saying that should have been called, yeah, it was egregious. Egregious.
Yep. Egregious.
Germ or
so Gage, you were in the stands at the time. What describe the bedlam that ensued from the remaining fans that during that last Hail Mary?
Well, I was part of the bedlam. You can go and see on Broncos Syndicate my reaction live on the live stream, the post-game stream. I went live as the game was winding down, and obviously not expecting that to happen. And myself, like pretty much everyone else in the stands, just going absolutely insane. I was definitely screaming, holy shit, holy shit, holy shit. I mean, it was awesome, man. Just the electricity and then the collective bummer that everyone got once the 2-point was no good. And then they showed it on the Jumbotron, pretty clear and obvious pass interference. Oh. I was trying not to speak on it too much in my post-game show until I got a better look at it. But when I got home and watched it over, I was like, what the fuck? Yeah. Man, it's just egregious. And again, man, I'm not one to blame the officials normally because there are several other plays in the game, but there were multiple plays in this game where the ref ball blatantly affected the outcome of the game. The Russell Wilson fumble where clearly he was getting his face mask grabbed. And yeah, it may have been just a little tick, but when you see a guy's head bob down and he loses the ball, what are you going to think?
Twice. It happened twice in that game. That happened twice. And they just decided not to call it.
Yeah. And I know that we didn't come on here just to have a bitch session, but that one play changed the entire momentum for the entire game. Mm-hmm. It allowed Washington to start staging that comeback. I mean, if they had called that, not only would the fumble not have happened, we would have gotten 15 more yards. So there's a chance of either a 24-3 or 28-3 score at that point.
And I think that there was a second momentum shift, and it was the Kareem Jackson play in the end zone. Mm-hmm. Like I think that's the second, play when you think about, momentum shifts. And, we definitely don't think Kareem Jackson is a dirty player by any means. But, there's times where you kind of have to just take away some of that physicality, especially in the end zone. And sadly, he did launch. Maybe he didn't hit him with his helmet or whatever, but he launched at him, in the end zone. And that's just something that you cannot do, in the NFL is you can't really launch at a player, And I mean, definitely you can't take the physicality out of a player. But it was just an unfortunate situation for Kareem, and hopefully I was a little surprised that the NFL chose not to suspend him. That was the word that broke down the last, 24, 48 hours is they chose not to suspend him. But I think that those were definitely the two plays where you really kind of saw the wheels fall off, for the Broncos a little bit.
Let's face it, Kareem as
I think Mike's got a point here. I really do.
So Kareem, he has to know better. I mean, he's the senior member of this team. We were shorthanded at the safety position. The touchdown had already been scored. I mean, it was a really bad decision for a guy that has to know. And now now they're not going to give him any slack moving forward. He's knocked 2 people out in the first 2 games. All eyes are on Kareem Jackson moving forward. So while he might not have been suspended, he really is going to run the risk of getting some.
He'll be on the hit list.
For sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. I mean, players in general, man. He's going to be just a target for a lot of players' beef. You know it. It's going to be just real ugly for Kareem Jackson. And again, he's going into year 13, 14, whatever it is. He's got to know better. He's got to know better.
Now, but I think it's also important to understand, like, he didn't mean to injure or anything like that. Because again, if you actually look at the clip itself, he was devastated when he saw what he did. When he saw what he did, and obviously Nick Gates, the offensive lineman and stuff, like, were retaliating. But if you actually see Kareem, like, he was frustrated, like, oh no, like, what just happened? Like, so he was definitely interested in the fact about the health of Logan Thomas, and so you were definitely glad to see that at least the human part of it kicked in. But to what you were mentioning, Glenn, like, he definitely has to understand better, because he scored, he was in the end zone. You don't really need to launch at a guy like that. I mean, you don't really need to launch, and because by that point in time, you're going to have just an unnecessary situation, and you're going to put yourself and the team in a really bad situation, which really did come back to bite him, because the safety position ends up becoming very, very thin at that position. De'Aaron Turner-Yell got injured in the game, and, Kareem Jackson obviously was just recently ejected. So they're very thin at that safety position. And we may actually enter a whole situation where you may see a couple rookies in that secondary come next week, with Riley Moss and, of course, J.L. Skinner, against Miami.
And with De'Aaron Turner-Yell, man, he really struggled out there. That touchdown to Terry McLaurin, he got picked on that one. I mean, the dude is just, he's a young player, and the Denver Broncos just put themselves in a really bad situation there with that whole Kareem Jackson ejection. And again, Kareem, I understand it's a bang play and he wants to jar the ball out, but again, he already scored. The play was over by that point. It's just tough, man. And it's another example of the Denver Broncos beating the Denver Broncos.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Our buddy Ty from the Incomplete Podcast wants to know if the Kareem Jackson hit is on him or the coaching.
Both.
Yeah, I'd say both. I think that what Gage was sort of talking about there and alluding to was the discipline of this team, in terms of the penalties. And I think that that's just a small part, or not a small part, but that's a part of what Peyton is really trying to get rid of with this team. And we saw glimpses of that in the preseason in terms of, with that starting unit, like small amount of penalties in the first half, but to see what you're seeing in terms of the first couple games in the major amount of penalties that have been happening in the first couple weeks, like, you want to make sure that those types of things are eliminated. And it's not just a discipline. This is a nice little transition, by the way. This is a nice little transition because discipline also isn't just the penalties that we've been seeing. Like, the discipline that you're also starting to see on the defensive side of the ball, which is the tackling, is absolutely so dreadful. So I think it's a part of the culture that I think Peyton really wants to instill, with he and Vance Joseph, because I think that's like the big thing in terms of one of the biggest drop-offs that you've seen from the defense under Ejiro Evero to the defenses that you've seen under Vance Joseph already in 2 weeks is the tackling has just been absolutely horrendous. And like, the big plays are happening. It's definitely a bend but not break defense. Probably more break than bend, but I mean, it's just like, but like, it's so bad. The middle of the field is open. The safeties is just, it just seems like when Justin Simmons is your leading tackler, you're doing something completely wrong on your defense. Mm-hmm. Your leading tackling, should be either your linebackers or people on your front seven. It should never be a safety or a corner. So it's just all bad from the discipline side of things.
Washington averaged 10 yards a rush in the third quarter. I mean, that is a shocking statistic.
And on screens too, man. The Broncos got embarrassed in the screen game. Once Vance Joseph started dialing up the pressure, man, Eric Bieniemy's going, all right, I'm just going to throw it right back in your face with the screen. And the Broncos cannot tackle to save their lives, both in the run game and on screens. And that really bit them in the second half, man. The Washington was able to bleed clock in that second half because they were able to run the ball and they were able to gash us in the screen game. And there were those 2 put away drives, man, where Washington just physically kicked our ass up front.
Yeah. And I think, to a certain extent, when you kind of take away to make it a little bit of a positive for a second, I think that's also a positive we should take away in terms of baby steps, in terms of the culture with Sean Payton. When you go look at it in the first half, the Washington front seven, particularly the defensive line, was a non-factor. And so if you're talking about some baby steps of this offensive line growing and maturing, throughout the season, we should look at that because it's a tough front seven. You saw Daron Payne possibly being the best player on the football field on Sunday, and that entire defensive line was a non-factor in the first half. And so I think that you definitely want to see that for a consistent 4 quarters, not a first half. And so I think that it's really important that we take those positive steps of like that what we saw in the first half and build off of that.
Yep.
Let's talk about the first half. We've gone negative for the first 17 minutes of the show, but the excitement, the bombs, the perfect passes, Marvin Mims, Jaleel scoring the first touchdown. You saw a glimpse of what really is possible with this team and with this offense. Gage, again, I'll tap into your experience being in the stadium, but what were some of those, when those big plays happened in the first half? What was the feel around you and in your section?
I mean, it was just like part relief to finally see the Broncos put some high level offensive production on the board, but just excitement, electricity. I mean, whenever the Broncos were on defense, especially, it got super duper loud. Obviously, when they're on offense, you kind of want to keep it a little bit more quiet. But when those big plays happened, guys were getting up out of their seats and screaming and cheering. It was just awesome, man. And the energy on the sideline, because I was kind of behind the Broncos sideline paying attention to what was going on there, man. And guys were dapping each other up. The sideline, the energy there was just absolutely electric. So that was really good to see, man. Just it felt like that was the brand of Broncos football we've been itching to see for so long. It just was a shame that we couldn't put it together for all 4 quarters.
Yeah, and even though we talk negative a lot about these last 2 games, like you, especially over the last 6-7 years, it's been all defense is great, offense is horrible. But if you look at points per possession, which is actually stat, I looked it up. Broncos are number 1. Broncos are number 1. Number 1 team with points per possession. So the offense is doing its job. It's doing what it's supposed to do. There's some little snafus with communication as far as like getting the plays out, but that's because Sean Payton has like a paragraph for a play.
Would you like me to give you an example of one of Sean Payton's plays?
I would love that.
All right, Russ. Let's go green left twins, Z short tight, fast 37 buster nudge, Y fluty sting X spear, kill 53 tight left on yellow.
Okay, what?
See what you just reenacted, Mike, is probably Russell Wilson in terms of his miscommunication, and everything that we saw on Sunday. Like,
yeah, he's in the huddle like we're doing Z fly left, bust a nut. Yeah, go do that.
Well, I think that I think the whole points per possession thing is such a fun statistic because I hate to use a layer with this, but like even with the miscommunication, the fact that you were able to put up 33 points in a game with that miscommunication tells you alone where Russell Wilson is currently at and with what the offense is currently at in terms of the actual production of what we're actually seeing on Sundays now. So I think that the fact about the offense and the way you're seeing the productivity should give Bronco fans that excitement again with what we can see with the offense. We mentioned the big plays to Marvin Mims. We mentioned some of the comparison. I mentioned some of the comparisons about Brandon Lloyd and possibly Brandon Cooks. Frankly, what we saw in terms of on that Sunday game against the Commanders was the Tyler Lockett that we'd seen in Seattle, which, funny enough, Lockett was from the Big 12. Marvin Mims is from the Big 12. They both have similar type of play styles in terms of ball tracking and ability to catch a deep ball. But I mean, like that alone should give you, some positive vibes from that. The dime to Marvin Mims twice, on the deep ball, the 60, 70-yard pass or whatever. There was the nice bomb play from Russ. The sideline throw was beautiful to Marvin. And so it was just it was a great thing to watch. And so I think that's the thing that you want to be able to take away is like, because that's some of the things that we have been itching to see from this offense. And currently this week, I said myself, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw the exact same type of offense from last week in terms of the Raiders game because of the way the defensive line was. But that's what we saw there is exactly what this offense should be. Get those big plays. And also, let's not undervalue this idea that, yes, Jerry Jeudy didn't exactly have all the catches, but that's the most important part of why Jeudy needs to be in this offense. So much attention is going to be held to him. It's going to open up so many opportunities for guys like Cortland Sutton, who didn't have a catch in the first half, and then the second half rises to the occasion and has a huge second half. I mean, Marvin Mims has a huge game. So I think that like it's a big, big deal, especially with no Greg Dulcich in the lineup.
Yep.
And Mims only was
Johnson in too, man.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, the potential of this
plays.
And guys, we're 2 weeks in a 17-week season. I know we all expected. I believe when we did our predictions, all four of us thought that the first two games were going to be W's. But the fact of the matter is we've lost two games by a total of 3 points. It's not ideal, obviously. We lost one of them to a division rival, two of them at home, which never used to happen. But the fact of the matter is these are fixable issues, aside from the injuries, that the offense can keep us in these games, whereas before they were not able to do so. Marvin Mims had 16 offensive plays. Jaleel McLaughlin had 5 offensive plays. When he ran in there untouched at the speed of light, I cannot for the life of me understand why we weren't giving him more touches and incorporating him more in the offense, particularly in the third and fourth quarters when things weren't really happening.
What was funny was the commentary by Archuleta right as soon as that play happened. Was as soon as you actually hear before they run the football, he said, I'm really interested to see if you get some play action here. But no, they decided to run the ball to McLaughlin, and you were able to see a wide open lane for McLaughlin run right in for the score. So it's also worth bringing forth this. I mentioned it on after the week one, a recap with the Raiders, but it's worth bringing this up again. Sean Payton in September, and this is based off his current record, is 27-25, and in October and January he is 125-66. So the point is that his teams just have a tendency to start slow. And also it's the fact about this is still a new regime. I realize, the Hackett's, the bad stuff with Hackett is probably still in the back of our brains, and, it's revisionist history, anything of that nature. But, it's really important to still adopt. It's still important to adopt the same logic of patience with this Denver Broncos team. Because as we talked about so much in the positivity with this offense, you absolutely have to give it time. And the fact that we're seeing so much work with the offense, hopefully the defense can catch on. I realize in terms of that, a lot of people are on social media, posting a lot of hatred about Vance Joseph. And look, I even that's revisionist history of everything that happened with Vance Joseph, but you do have to give it some time. Maybe that's a personnel thing. That's a conversation for another day. But I think that you absolutely have to see some patience go out, with this team. But did I expect this type of regression with the defense? No, I absolutely did not. So, but you have to absolutely be shown some patience with this.
You mentioned Adam Archuleta. He had another instance where he said, this is a type of play that will set you up to throw a deep ball, and the next play was the first Mims touchdown. So we didn't get the A team as far as like the broadcasting guys, but I thought he was a phenomenal
Old Tony Romo
analyst.
Yeah,
he was great.
Yeah, Adam Archuleta, he can call a game, man. He is really, really great doing color. I thought he was really insightful because I went back right when I got home and watched the TV copy, and I thought Adam Archuleta did a really great job there. And with the Broncos play calling, especially in that first half, man, first drive, they run it down Washington's throat. Then that second drive is when they hit him with the play action and hit him with that deep bomb to Marvin Mims, man. What you saw from Sean Payton is setting up plays for those big, deep shots. We didn't see that with Nathaniel Hackett last year. We didn't see him setting up plays 3 or 4 plays ahead of time. He was playing checkers. He wasn't playing chess. Sean Payton is playing chess with his offense, and it's really, really fun to see. But in the second half, I do feel like Washington made some adjustments that made things really hard for Denver, like especially to run the football. And that's when we saw them having to depend a little bit more on the passing game. And that's when we saw that interception on the miscommunication between Russell Wilson and Courtland Sutton. And I haven't watched the tape yet. I don't normally like to watch Tim Jenkins stuff until after I watch the tape and do my own evaluation. But I did see his clip of him breaking the interception down. And that apparently was just a bad decision by Russ, even if he was to throw the go or if he was to throw the stop. It was just an overall bad, busted play. So that was one where you can definitely maybe point to Russell Wilson and go, okay, yeah, that was a negative play. There was another key third down where he had Jerry Jeudy wide open, put it on the wrong shoulder. Jeudy had to make an adjustment on the ball, and he was too short. He was like 2 yards short of the line to gain. So that's another one you could probably point at Russ. But overall, man, at the end of the day, the defense got a big stop there. It was either late in the third or early in the fourth with that strip sack. And obviously that made Washington's drive stall. Denver gets the ball back. They go downfield. They kick a field goal, and we go up. I believe it was 24-21 by that point. And then the subsequent defensive drive, that's when Washington started running the football with Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson. They gashed us downfield on that drive on 2 big runs and 2 big screens, if I'm not mistaken. They took time off the clock, and that's the one that they went up 28-24. And then after that, Denver got the ball back. They were playing from behind, and that's when Washington started to dial up pressure, and that's when we had some big issues there. So that was just a really bad sequence there, I felt like.
Yeah.
Did you guys see the sideline where Peyton was talking to Vance? And Peyton was pissed, and he's walking, and Vance is just walking away from him. Like, I'm not going to sit here and listen to this. It was a very awkward interaction. You wonder what that relationship actually is truly like. But
could have hired Sean Desai.
Yeah, or Rex Ryan, apparently.
Ryan.
Yeah, with the public comments that it was, made about Rex Ryan, like it certainly seems like he's maybe a little slightly bitter about, not getting the job, but he's also the one that mentioned about the points per possession, obviously. I will say, one of the things that, and I hope that this is going to be a theme, going forward in terms of a change. We were, told so often about, the Denver Broncos and running the football and establishing the run. Where is it? Where is this run game? Like, I think that's the thing for me too, as far as an adjustment. Where is this running game? Samaje Perine only had 1 carry. 1 carry
against his old team.
Against the Commanders, and Javonte had 12 carries, and I just really hope that this is a trend continues where they establish that running game more. So I just think that we have to be, and maybe it's just one of those cases where, some of these huge chunk plays are getting set up because of the run, right? But also I think that, there are far more positives with Russell Wilson than there are negative plays, but you still have to be able to hit some of those plays. Like one of the other plays that Gage we mentioned earlier with the 2-point conversion, obviously with the play to Courtland Sutton. Yes, there was a blatant pass interference on not just Courtland Sutton, but Samaje Perine. But from the breakdown, it seemed like Jerry Jeudy was actually his read, and he decided to go to Courtland Sutton, and Jeudy was actually just crossing over to be open. And it seemed like Russ didn't exactly see him. So there were a few miscues from Russ in terms of the game, but I mean, it's just been an impressive season. I will say it's been an impressive season for Russ this year. I mean, like, there was a crazy stat that I was able to pull up, in terms of like pass concepts. So in play action, Russ is 11 of 17 for 139 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 64 completion percentage. No play action, he's 34 of 49, 349 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, which is about 69% completion percentage. The screen game, which is probably an area where they need to work on, is 4 of 6, 2 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 66% completion. No screen, obviously. And this is probably a majority of their pass concepts, but 41 of 60, 483 yards, 5 touchdowns and 1 interception, 68 completion percentage. If you were to tell me that the Broncos would have that kind of Russell Wilson and the fact that you would be getting more than 60% completion percentage, and of course, if they were to put up, 33 points or even be up by 21-3, that they would actually lose the game, I would actually laugh at you. But in terms, like, they actually lost the game.
Man, I thought that was stats for the last 2 games. I was like, I don't think Russ is thrown for that much. Games.
I know the Russell hate just continues. Remember last year, it was like, oh, when's he going to have more touchdown passes than bathrooms in his house? Like, he already has more touchdown passes than bathrooms in his house.
Yeah.
Or bedrooms or whatever it was. It's just like the fans. I can't. I understand the frustration. I've been a fan longer than most, mainly because I'm old. But it just we gotta just like dial it back a little bit. I mean, this is. Let's stick to the facts. I mean, the revisionist history. Like people saying we should have hired Rex Ryan now. Like, no, like we shouldn't. Like. But we're just so, that VJ, just didn't. Sean Payton hired him for a reason. We can't cherry pick when we're going to have faith in the guy as a head coach and when we're not. He's either good or he's not. His decision making is either good or it's not. We just got to, and we're going into Miami. It's going to be a very tough game. We've won 1 out of 9 games in against the Dolphins at Miami. It's crazy. So
that's arguably going to be our toughest road game this year, aside from, of course, Kansas City. I mean, this game is going to be hot. It's going to be humid. It's just going to be a really tough one, especially for the big guys. This is going to be a battle where I feel like it's going to be tough for the trenches on both sides of the ball. This one, I feel like, has the makings of a shootout. It really does, because this Miami defense, if we can establish the run game, they really struggled against the run against the Chargers. Now, I didn't really get to break down how they had responded to that week 2 against the Patriots, but we all know that this Vic Fangio defense has its weaknesses, and Sean Payton, I feel like, is going to be able to dial up a game plan to expose it. But then, obviously, on the other side of the ball, we have to deal with Miami's high-flying offense with Tua Tagovailoa, Tyreek Hill. I don't know if Jalen Waddle's going to play in this one because of concussion protocol.
Something to watch.
I mean, that is something big time to watch. But they've got plenty of playmakers on that side of the ball, and they've got one of the best schemers in the NFL on the offensive side of the ball in the Denver native and former Broncos ball boy, Mike McDaniel. So,
yeah, and of course,
did you see him running away from the cameraman the other day?
Yeah.
This guy is the funniest guy in the NFL. He's always on. I love it.
And he's an absolute like schemer, offensive schemer. It's great. I think it'll be interesting to see how emotions are going to be in terms of riding high, because some of these players played with Vic Fangio, and of course the emotions of riding high with Vic Fangio. So there's the possibility of it being a shootout, but there's also the possibility of it not being a shootout and being a complete defensive game, which I wouldn't even be surprised with. Which, by the way, before we dump into the Miami game, we should at least give some praise. Obviously, it was 35-33, but we should give some praise to the fact that there was no pass rush against the Oakland Raiders, Las Vegas Raiders. I don't care. I'll still call them Oakland. Against the Raiders. But the fact is that, like, in that game against the Commanders, we finally got a chance to see that pressure. In fact, we got a chance to see Nick Benito's best game as a Denver Bronco. The guy, from start to finish, probably would have ended up with 50 pressures on the game, the way he was attacking the quarterback. Gregory had a really good game, which is exactly what you needed to see. The interior of the defensive line was a little bit of a problem, of course, with Brian Robinson and, so as some of those, screen games and something, and to that nature. But we got a chance to finally see that pass rush. Jonathan Cooper with a huge strip sack, so we got a chance to finally see that pressure, come forward in week 2. So hopefully that is a thing. Now, on the flip side to the Miami game, something to watch, and maybe this is just the emotions of returning and playing your old team, but Bradley Chubb, that Sean Payton trade is probably going to work out for the better anyway. Mm-hmm. But Bradley Chubb is not good with the Miami Dolphins in terms of his pass rush win rate. He is not good. I think he's like 51 of 59 in the NFL in terms of where he ranks right now. It's not looking good right now in terms of his fit with Miami. So but again, like, he's not the only one that I wouldn't be worried about. They obviously have Jalen Phillips, on that other end, a freak of an athlete. So the offensive line still has to be able to, play to their standards.
Yeah. And I know that we've been talking a lot about the offense. We're getting ready to talk about the Miami game, but I do think we need to talk about the defense. I think that's the biggest issue that Broncos country is having right now is what's the problem? Is it talent on the defense? Is it Vance Joseph? Is it Sean Payton? What's the issue? And I think, and Gage, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's both Vance and talent on the defense. I think that we kind of overestimated the talent, at least in the front 7 of the Broncos. And I think that as far as Vance Joseph goes, we played a little bit too much zone when we should have played a little bit more man. And I think those are things that can be corrected, except for, is there a way that Vance can cover for not having as much talent as we thought we had on the defense?
That's tough. That's really tough. I mean, I definitely would agree that the talent on the front 7 has been massively disappointing, especially on the interior defensive line. Zach Allen has been pretty disappointing. I'm not going to lie. He's got some pressures. He does have some pressures, but I feel like in the run defense, he's been pretty disappointing. And obviously he's not winning those, and he's not getting home on those pressures. He is winning occasionally on the line of scrimmage, but I don't think it's been the Zach Allen that we expected coming out of training camp. DJ Jones, I've been sorely disappointed in him. Jonathan Harris hasn't played at the level that we need him to play. I mean, those 3 guys I feel like are a big factor in some of our defensive struggles, especially in the run game. But I mean, at the end of the day, the tackling, that's discipline. That I feel like a good chunk of it is on coaching, but some of it is personnel as well. I mean, we see guys like DJ Jones, Jonathan Harris missing tackles, but also, Alex Singleton and Josie Jewell. We've seen those guys miss tackles, and then Justin Simmons too. It's just, I feel like a kind of combination of scheme, because this scheme, I feel like, struggles with finding its identity right now. When I watch this defensive play calling, it almost feels like watching Nathaniel Hackett's offense last year, where there's no anticipation of what plays the offense is going to run on the other side of the ball, especially in that Washington game. I mean, Washington started killing us with screens, and it felt like Denver wasn't adjusting to it. They started killing us in the run game, and it felt like Denver wasn't adjusting to it. It feels like they're trying to combine a lot of these Vance Joseph pressures and fronts with Vic Fangio coverage principles, but they are sprinkling in a lot of Vance Joseph's cover 3 and stuff too. I mean, I saw coverage chart where the Broncos are one of the top teams in the league running cover 3, just the amount of times that they run it. So it feels like this is almost a jumbled schematic salad, if that makes any sense, where they're trying to do too many things. Would you agree, Cam?
And I think that this is where I think the issue with this idea of multiple different ideas, with Christian Parker, having an influence, and Vance Joseph having an influence, in terms of the defense. When you have too many heads in the kitchen, it's just a garbled salad at that point. You're hearing a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different opinions, and you're going to be, not sure, what it is that you're wanting to believe. I mean, like, in terms of, okay, so you said I should be in man. Vance Joseph said this is going to be zone. What exactly are we running here? So And I think a lot of that is going to lead to a lot of miscommunication, a lot of missed assignments, and a lot of really bad tackling. And we talked about it earlier. That turns into the discipline of this football team. And I think if we're solely to talk about this idea of a full rebuild, maybe, this whole idea of a rebuild isn't so much on the offensive side of the ball, except for, say, a few parts, but I would say it's more so on the defensive side of the ball, in particular the front seven, with the idea of some corners thrown into there as well. Because I still think the safety unit has the propensity to still be one of their deepest, of course, on the team. A lot of still unknowns and potential within that unit, but I mean, you have to be able to establish some sort of identity at cornerback number 2. Mathis didn't step up in terms of cornerback number 2, but I will say, while the secondary did not play as great as well as the front seven, we also got to be objective here. We got to give credit where credit is due. Eric Bieniemy and especially Sam Howell played their butts off, coached their butts off, and played their butts off against the Broncos. Frankly, I hate to use this comparison, and I'm not saying he's going to take this leap like a Jalen Hurts, but it almost felt reminiscent of the game that Jalen Hurts had against the Broncos, where a lot of people were doubting, the potential of this young man and where he could potentially take the Eagles, down the line. Sam Howell proved a lot of people wrong in that game against the Broncos. I mean, yeah, the play with Turner, Yell, and Mathis on the coverage, Turner was a little bit late on that, but the coverage from Mathis actually wasn't all that bad. Howell just threw a absolute perfect ball on that touchdown play, and there were a lot of windows where Howell made the correct, throw in, and so he was perfect on nearly every single occasion in that game, even despite being down 21-3. So, yeah, we absolutely have to give credit where credit is due that that Howell played out of his freaking mind.
He did.
He's a hell of a quarterback. He really is, and I think we can't underestimate the injury factor, especially in the secondary. Having Caden Stearns and PJ Locke on, K'Wan Williams. I mean, that is so glaring right now when you look at how bad Mathis has been. I mean, I think we were all so excited about Mathis being, the guy on the other side of Surtain, and he has just been an absolute disaster. I don't know what George Payton is doing as far as trying to bring in some other personnel to bolster that defensive backfield, but I just don't feel like I'm seeing it quite yet. And we're going to end up relying on some of these really, really young green guys. I mean, Cam mentioned JL Skinner. I mean, he's got to come up for this game coming up. And I mean, he was a 6th round pick, I'm excited to see him play, but what kind of expectations can you have for, as he's going against, one of the most potent offenses in the NFL?
Yep. Yeah. So in terms of that second boundary corner spot, I mean, I'm going to put this this was a problem that should have been fixed in the offseason, because when we were in training camp, Mathis had some struggles. It wasn't anything super duper bad, but he was struggling out there to a point where you could be almost like, okay, yeah, we've got some in-house options in Jaquan McMillan, who we really like. They were working him quite a bit at boundary and training camp. But by the same token, you could have gone out and re-signed Ronald Darby on a cheap deal before he got to Baltimore. I mean, Ronald Darby, excuse me, I got a frog in my throat. Ronald Darby was playing some really, really high-level football before he tore his ACL. Why not take a 1-year flyer on him and see if he could perform to that level again? I mean, that's just one where I'm like, that was a missed opportunity for me.
Yeah, and of course, Riley Moss was inactive on Sunday, but it seems like he's trending in the direction of possibly playing on Sunday. And I think that this is where I'm a little bit hard, in terms of Mathis and, and preaching this word on patience, because Damari Mathis was so good at the tail end of last year. Well, from the midway point to the end of last season, and he was so bad. And it is so bad for the first couple games, but also this is where it's hard, and it's not just a secondary thing, but it's also a team as a whole. We're talking about this thing on week 2. right? And it's definitely bad. But like, if these problems are a persistent thing going on throughout the regular season, then it's a big problem, and it absolutely needs to be addressed. And for Riley Moss, in terms of the cornerback 2 spot, I wouldn't be surprised if you see it dabbled a little bit where he is the corner that is outside of Pat Surtain. But even then, is the Miami game the right game to do that, right? Because like
right.
because there's so many weapons. There's so many weapons that are on that Miami team that is it smart to put him on like a Jalen Waddle or whoever their wide receiver will be outside of Tyreek Hill, right? So is it smart to do that, right? Because we tend to make that kind of argument for a young quarterback, right? Like, is this smart to start him in this kind of environment? We hear that so often in college. Well, in this opportunity, it's like we may start a guy like Riley Moss, but like, is it smart to give him that kind of assignment right out of the gate, right after the fact he's been healed from his abdomen injury? So I mean, is that something that he can do? I think it's very interesting to develop during the regular season, but like, he's going to need to get some of those snaps under his belt before you kind of see it sort of develop down the line. And as far as Mathis too, it's like, I want to see more. I want to see what we saw from the midway point to last season, which was the aggressiveness, the tackling, where he was just hip by hip on a wide receiver. I mean, like, we want to see what we have been accustomed to seeing. And right now you're not. And I think that's where, as far as with week 2, you're hearing some of the stuff about what we're talking about, which is that frustration with Mathis. And if it persists, go out and sign Bradley Roby. Go out and bring in Bryce Callahan. Bring in some help along, in terms of the nickel spot. And hopefully, K'Wan Williams can come back, or, PJ Locke can address that secondary once he's healthy. So it's hard because, like, again, it's week 2, and I would rather have these issues on week 2 than in week 16 and 17.
Well,
Cam, I have the question here.
Well, I was going to say, I've got 2 questions for you. One, is it a possibility that we see more of Bassey over Mathis?
No.
And 2, where in God's name is Drew Sanders?
Well, so I will say Bassey, with the fact that the safety position's been hit hard, I think you will see Bassey more in more of the safety nickel side of things, with where you saw it in preseason, which I think with where he played in preseason, it seems like that felt like more of a much natural place for him in terms of the versatility there. So I think you'll see more of it there. The Drew Sanders stuff is actually very frustrating. And I will say this is where I feel very pissed off at Vance, because this is something that Vance has done even dating back to the Arizona Cardinals when they had Isaiah Simmons and Zaven Collins, particularly Isaiah Simmons, the unicorn that can play basically everywhere. And we had no idea where to play Simmons. Vance wasn't sure, do you play him at linebacker? Do you play him at safety? Where exactly are you going to fit him, on the field? I don't want to say you're seeing exactly that kind of deal with Drew Sanders, but him only playing 4 snaps this Sunday, and one of those opportunities was a sack thanks to a pretty petty call on Fabian Moreau on the holding penalty. I mean, like, I absolutely think we need to see more from Drew Sanders. And if it actually is that the pass rush is non-existent, or, it's there every once in a while, hello, why not insert Drew Sanders in there? Even once Baron Browning is going to be there, put him in there. The more pass rushers, the better. The more opportunities you'll be able to get to the quarterback. Put Drew Sanders in the game and make him available so that he can do any of the things that he wants to do, getting to the quarterback.
You mentioned Moreau.
Yeah, putting Drew Sanders. Sorry,
I was going to say that Moreau penalty was an absolute backbreaker. They had the Washington ready to punt, and it gave them a free first down. I mean, that was just another discipline. Discipline. It's plays such a massive part in all of this.
That Moreau one, in my opinion, was a very ticky-tack call.
I said petty.
I did not see a whole lot there. Yeah, it was bad. That was just a really bad call. But I mean, overall, man, I feel like if we put Drew Sanders in there, that could solve some of our tackling woes. Because just in terms of range, being able to fly around the field, Drew Sanders is one of the better tacklers that we have. I feel like that would really solve a lot of these tackling woes, especially possibly in the screen game.
Exactly.
Does he go in at middle linebacker or inside linebacker, or does he go in at edge?
I think
off ball.
Okay.
But he's versatile enough, because I think that ideally, I think when they had drafted him, they wanted him probably in the future to be an inside linebacker, but his ability as a downhill threat to rush the passer is a little bit, I think, of what the Broncos had maybe with the Alexander Johnson, right? And I think that he's just far more athletic, but so I wouldn't be surprised if you see him on the off ball. But in the terms of the screen game, that's one area where absolutely I think is where he can make the most impact. Because if we're here to talk about maybe one of the biggest weaknesses of this defense and getting off the field, it is undoubtedly the screen game. So the Travis Kelce screen plays, against the Kansas City Chiefs, that's giving me absolute nightmares right now with this defense and what is going to happen.
I mean, we saw Eric Bieniemy doing it with Cole freaking Turner.
Right. So we didn't even see it with like guys like Antonio Gibson. We saw it with Brian Robinson and Cole Turner, and they were just eating them up. So I just think that Drew Sanders, I said it before, and it's very unfortunate, but when I wrote the article, I didn't intend for, injuries to happen, but sadly, Caden Stearns was an X factor. He's injured. He's out for the year. Damari Mathis was an X factor, and he's not playing up to snuff. Drew Sanders was an X factor, and you're not seeing hardly any snaps from Drew. And, you absolutely need to see that. Now, I will say, so Broncos in VA just put in a really good point. Like, that's one where I think if the Bassie argument, to what we were talking about earlier, if they feel really comfortable about putting Bassie in terms of just solely the nickel spot, I wouldn't be surprised if you do see Riley Moss at safety at some point, because he's such a game breaker, in terms of how he can turn the ball over, which is another part of this defense that we've not seen, is the ability to turn the ball over. So I absolutely think that the whole idea with Drew Sanders and possibly Riley Moss getting a lot more playing time is something we need to consider.
Well, like,
I'm really hoping that
complaints I've had on defense. Sorry, Glenn. All the complaints I've had on defense, none of them have been about Bassie. I like where he's
funny,
at.
Right? It's kind of funny because like Bassie was one of those players that he was on the outside looking in, and now he's a very underrated player.
I was going to say, I'm really hoping that Damari can pull it together. The thing about him last season that I was most impressed with was when he had those 4 pass interference calls against the Chargers on that national game. As a rookie, he could have just fallen into a hole, just crumped out. And he didn't. He bounced back. He didn't let that change, and he wasn't tentative in the way that he played. And if he can channel what he did after that Charger game for the rest of the season, we could salvage what we've got there, and he can live up to expectations that we all of Broncos country had going into the season for him. If not, it's, any of these options that you guys just described are on the table for sure.
Yeah.
Would that be a good pairing? Sorry. Like Riley Moss and Justin Simmons? Would that be a good pairing?
I can see it.
It's definitely one where, again, like I hate to use this comparison because he hasn't really panned out in the NFL, but coming from Iowa, Joshua Jackson was a dynamic corner from Iowa, like interceptions, playmaking, taking it to the house, pick sixes, a punt returner, a reliable punt returner. Like it was just, he was dynamic. And Riley Moss was almost that exact same way. And so I think that one of the things for Jackson was I don't know if he even took that leap or the change of position to safety, but when you have that kind of playmaking skills, I wouldn't be surprised if you do see a consideration for Moss at safety, and especially with the lack of depth, at safety, I wouldn't be upset by it. And so I think it would be definitely something, that's worth following. And but I will say, we still have to be able to see what he could do, as a cornerback first, before you can kind of make, some of the determinations about what, is he a better safety than a corner? But he does have the versatility for sure.
Yep. I'm going to say something, and I know Broncos country is probably going to rip me a new one for this. Justin Simmons has not played well this year, like at all. He has played some pretty bad ball, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
Like, if Justin Simmons continues to play at this level, the Broncos need to consider selling as high as they can at the trade deadline. I'm not even kidding. If this defense continues to regress and this defense continues to put this offense or in this team in a position, let's say we're at the trade deadline and we're 2-6 or whatever it is, then you have to throw out the possibility of trading away some of these high value veterans, such as a Justin Simmons, try to reap whatever draft capital you can and fully commit to rebuilding on the defensive side of the ball. Shut up, stupid computer. But
even the computer disagrees with you.
Yes, yeah. The computer definitely disagrees with me, but I feel like the Broncos, if this continues to go south defensively, they need to pour whatever resources they can into rebuilding. And for me, that all starts with rebuilding in the trenches and getting a dominant defensive line, man. Edge rush, we've got some good pieces, but yeah. But I mean, on the interior, this team desperately needs high-end reinforcements. What's the value you get for him? I don't know if you're getting a first-round pick for Justin Simmons. I really don't.
Hey.
I think you might be looking down maybe a second-round pick or something like that. What say you, Cam?
You're asking the wrong person. Justin Simmons, my favorite Broncos player of all time. You're asking. You're asking
barking up the wrong tree in there.
But I gotta say though, like it's true. Simmons isn't playing, the best, and I don't know if that's more. Here's where a case where if Justin Simmons isn't playing well, that could be an indictment of. This is probably a scheme-related thing in terms of a personnel thing, because we said so often about, how Simmons was, a really good fit for Fangio or the Christian Parker type defense. And that's really, it makes you wonder, in terms of, is he really a good fit, for Vance Joseph, which is so funny because, Simmons was drafted by Vance Joseph, if I'm not mistaken. So it's like, but to see his, to see where he was, coming into the league, actually may have been under Gary Kubiak, because I think it was
a year before.
Yeah, but like he started out with Vance Joseph. You saw his career trajectory take off, but then I just think that I don't know. It's very curious. So like if you're overall talking about like the comparison of like, is it personnel or is it player? You do have to look at Simmons.
Gage, you got Bill so mad he can't even type the right word.
Yeah. To me, you don't get rid of the heart and soul of your team. And I'm with Cam. Like Justin's my favorite player on the team. It's there are so many other options. I think the only way that he ever would get traded is if he asked for it. If he said, I need to get it. I need to play a playoff game in my life. And that would be, to me, he's, again, 3-time NFL Man of the Year nominee for the team. I just don't see it unless they're doing him a solid just to get him on a team that has a chance to win a championship.
I mean, if you're really and again, if you're talking about two defensive cornerstones, your secondary isn't playing up to snuff, but those are two of your franchise cornerstone players in terms of Justin Simmons and Pat Surtain. Now, obviously, to use a comparison, I think we heard some talk that the trade of Bradley Chubb kind of severed the locker room a little bit in terms of, but I will say if the Broncos choose to move on from Justin, that will actually sever the entire locker room from that point of view. I mean, if we thought the Chubb thing severed the locker room, the Simmons one is going to sever it a lot.
The Chubb trade was nothing short of genius. We ended up with a first-round pick for a guy we were never going to re-sign. We used that pick to get our current coach. Chubb signs a $100 million plus contract, and he's underperforming that already. It was just, that was a trade that made perfect sense. It's when you look at some of these, just some of the other ones that we've discussed, and I can't even believe we had even gone down that road. How dare you, Gage?
I knew it was a spicy take. I knew it was
Last
spicy.
time I was in Denver, Justin Simmons signed my son's hat and took a picture with him. So I'll overlook your sacrilege right now. Don't do it again.
Be careful now. It's spicy.
But to what Gage is talking about, though, and whether this is staying with the Broncos, and this will be a huge testament of patience and longevity for Justin, but I will say, Justin deserves to be a part of a winner. He deserves to be a part of a winner. And if the team decides to move on from him, it has to be to a certain contender. It has to be to a team that is going to be contending, not just for right now, but for the future, because he deserves that in terms of with where the Broncos are currently at. So he deserves to be, in terms of a contender. Now, I will say this. He does love it here. In just some of the conversations that I know that I've had with him, he loves it here. He loves Denver. I think they just recently moved. So, he absolutely loves Colorado. I wouldn't be surprised if he, if he truly does retire as a Denver Bronco. And so it could, I hate to use this as an argument because, in different sports, they're obviously very different players, but it's almost like the Charlie Blackmon argument with the Rockies. Like he almost accept the fact that he's going to be with the Colorado Rockies for, his entire career. Justin Simmons maybe feels like one of those players that could be a Denver Bronco for his entire career.
Oh my God. I hope.
But I don't know if I feel that way. I don't feel like I feel that way necessarily for Pat Surtain, because he's a guy that you're going to have to lock up sooner rather than later if you keep losing. Because if you keep losing, the higher probability that you're going to lose Surtain gets even higher and higher and higher because he wants to, leave the Broncos. So I will say Simmons staying is far more likely than Surtain staying, that's more of a spicy take because we do need to lock up Surtain. And pay him the kind of money that he deserves, not after this year.
Yep.
So when the Broncos shocked the world, I was going to say when we shocked the world this weekend and beat the Dolphins, all this is for naught.
Yeah.
All of this bellyache.
Absolutely.
Very unlikely it's going to happen, but
I will say this though. I had that same feeling about Von Miller. I had that exact same feeling. Like, there's no way that they would ever trade Von Miller away. He'd never want to leave Denver. I'm sorry. I'm just pointing it out, man. Yes. That's the one for me. That was the one for me that I actually shed legitimate tears. I cried when they traded Von Miller because he's one of those players for me that gave me that emotional tie to the team. So I say this, having that same thought with Von Miller, and he ended up getting shipped out the door.
Yeah.
And I think for not knowing him and not having chatted with him much, throughout the NFL, I think there are certain players that are going to stick with the team more likely than like a defensive coordinator and offensive coordinator would, right? Like there's those guys on your team that person stays. If there's a problem, the coordinator goes first. And I feel like Simmons is that guy. Like you keep Justin Simmons on the team, you tell Joseph, fix it or get out. And then if he can't fix it, you find somebody else. I feel like that would be Simmons. Like he stays and the coordinator goes.
And I realize we're going a little bit long, but I think that what you're opening the door of is a conversation that is of course what a lot of fans and people on social media are having, which is, do you move on from Vance Joseph right now? Or do you cut ties, at the midway point of the season, or and when I say midway point of the season, I mean like the bye week, or do you do it after the season? I will say this, if it's a personnel thing and they feel comfortable about Vance Joseph being the defensive coordinator for many years to come, they should build the defense the way Vance Joseph wants it. Whether that's with Justin Simmons there or Pastor Tan there, that's up for them to decide. I think that they need to make a decision. So if this prolongs, and if the defense prolongs the way it is in terms of allowing the big plays and the big chunk plays and allowing so many, 3-down conversions and, so on and so forth, if it prolongs, they do need to make that determination about moving on from Vance Joseph, even after a year. I hate to say that, but not at the midway point. I think a conversation is certainly to be had at the midway point, but it's better to move on from him and promote Christian Parker to DC. And then I hate to use this as an idea because, of course, he blasted this on, ESPN and everything about, him being the defensive coordinator, but bring Rex Ryan in, a guy that you probably would have wanted as your defensive coordinator, but bring him in as a defensive coordinator consultant, bring him on, and obviously have it be with he and Rex Ryan, Christian Parker and Rex Ryan, basically leading it. So, because I think that, because at that point you basically have admitted to the fact that, well, and I think maybe Sean Payne really wanted to hire Vic Fangio, right? But you go to Vance Joseph, which we all know is not a Vic Fangio type of system. And so if he goes to Rex Ryan, it's a little bit more of a similarity to the Vance Joseph system, so it's a little bit interesting. So if they decide to go and promote Christian Parker to defensive coordinator, you're basically admitting, it's very obvious that the Vic Fangio style tree and everything that we want to have indoors is something we believe in. And so the current players and the current construction, that it was a personnel thing or a defensive coordinator thing from that side of things. And so we decided to move on from Vance Joseph at that and bring up Christian Parker and so on and so forth.
Now, see, Gage, you got Bill so mad. We are Broncos County now. We're not even a country. We've been downgraded to county.
Yep. Trust me, though, I would never advocate for a Justin Simmons release. That is something I will never advocate for.
You just did.
Yeah.
No, I advocated for a Justin Simmons trade for the right in the right. If things continue to go to shit,
Miller.
I advocated.
And Bill's talking about all the ridiculous moves George Payton has made. I would like to know what he's referencing.
Name one.
You know what my favorite is
Randy Gregory.
They signed Russell Wilson to a contract extension, sight unseen. I'm like, sight unseen. He played 10 years. Like, what are we talking about?
He was already a Hall of Famer before.
Here's the question I have for you. What GM in the league, aside from John Schneider in Seattle, wouldn't have done the exact same thing?
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
Oh, we were all thrilled that he got signed. We were all thrilled that the trade he got signed. I mean, it's just I don't know what happened to Broncos country where it became the bandwagoners of Patriots. Like the Patriot fans that I deal with on a daily basis. What's that?
That you hate so much.
You really are centered in enemy territory there, Glenn.
I know for sure. Oh, I mean, one of the worst days of my life was when Russ threw that interception in the Super Bowl when they didn't give it to beast mode and the Patriots ended up winning that. Going to work the next day was not enjoyable.
Because when Patriots fans are winning, man, they are the most annoying fan base, hands down, bar none.
It's certainly
not even close.
Before we go into Miami,
pull up Big Mike's comment, Mike, real quick, if you could, because that is an absolute fact. That is an absolute fact. Ownership told George Payton to sign that, to get that extension done. So,
and I was going to say too, we had this exact same conversation, Mike and Glenn, right? Like once the trade happened, there also had to have been conversations about the fact, the extension getting done, right? Like, so like we were having that conversation that there certainly had to have been some conversations about an extension, about them possibly extending Russell Wilson. So it's like, this didn't really come, once we actually made the trade. So yeah, so it didn't come as a surprise. I think what was a surprise was should they, right? Like, should they actually have extended him, even though he had like 2 years remaining on the deal, coming in. So should they, that's really the conversation. Should they have actually extended him? But the fact that they did shows that one, they're confident in him. And if it was ownership that was pushing the deal, this is something that we should reiterate. that also could mean he's still in their future plans for a couple more years, right? Doesn't mean that they may draft, that their rookie quarterback. They still could draft a rookie quarterback, right? They could draft him next year. They probably should, actually. Like that's probably
they will.
Yeah, but I bet they will. So it's just like I guarantee.
Bill has a point.
If he says McManus, I swear to God, I'm going to kick you.
Yeah.
Letting Alberto go.
I mean, at the end of the day, man, this whole Russell Wilson extension point, at the end of the day, with the salary cap the way it is, the ownership could move on from Russell Wilson if they wanted to. They could eat the financial penalties. It's very clear that this ownership group could do it.
They really don't care for dead cap. They wouldn't care for the dead cap.
They'll just dip right into their pockets and account for that with their own cash. They literally don't give two shits about dead cap. If they want to move on from Russ, they will. But at the end of the day, if Russell Wilson continues to play at the level that he's playing right now, we don't need to have this damn conversation because Russell Wilson is playing at a high enough level right now to win this team football games.
That's the point. And that is the point. I hate to circle around back to I hate to talk about Wilson stuff again, but it's just like again, like he is playing so well right now that obviously and there's this whole much to do about last year and so forth, but the more Russell Wilson performs, the more Russell Wilson performs at the level that he's accustomed to, like he's very clearly playing at such a high level that any people that was pro Hackett, the idea that Hackett wasn't the problem and Russ is, he's shutting that narrative every single week. He's playing at a high, at a high clip. So absolutely he is playing at such a high level that if he currently is, what is it? He's on pace for 42 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. No one ever had that on our radar. And so if he puts up those kinds of numbers and the types of passing yards that we're seeing, and at the percentage, the completion percentage clip that we're seeing, you're not talking about, a Russell Wilson that's going to find himself, not on the doorstep of the Hall of Fame. You're going to find Russell Wilson on the conversation once again of the doorstep of the Hall of Fame because he's the only quarterback in NFL history to throw for 40,000 yards and rush for 5,000 yards. So it's just like he's the only quarterback to do that. So I think if we absolutely have to understand that it is possible that Russell Wilson, we're finally getting the glimpse of the Russell Wilson we wanted to see, and that is solely because of Sean Payton and everything that he wanted to unlock with him.
And he has, man.
Did I ban him?
Oh, my God. You banned Bill.
Time out.
No, it says Broncos breakdown was banned and their comments were removed. Big Mike, I live in New Hampshire.
He just texted me.
That is hysterical. Does that mean he can't even Bill. Broadcast his own show?
All right, that's it. Bill's off the network now.
Uh-oh.
Good call, Mike. Good call.
Yeah.
That's why we were laughing so hard.
Yes. Oh, I just read it. I was like, banned. Wait, I hit timeout. No, I didn't.
Banned.
Whoops. Whatever.
Yeah.
That'll teach you, motherfucker.
Yeah.
Okay.
That teaches you to disagree with me, Bill.
Yeah. Going into the.
Well, he said don't mention McManus, and Bill dropped a McManus.
Actually, this is what I want to talk about first. Is real quick. 3 beginning steps to get the defense fixed.
Tackling first and foremost for me.
And that starts with more Drew Sanders.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's number 1 for me.
Yeah, I will say tackling, more pressure, more quarterback pressures, and that sort of ties in with Drew Sanders as well. But like just more pressures, more sacks, more QB hits, getting to the quarterback, and then 3, turning the ball over. Turning the ball over is number 3. We didn't get a chance to talk about it much, but like they have to be able to create turnovers. I think that one of the most underrated statistics in football, whether it's college or the NFL, is turnover margin. If they can win the turnover margin, they have a chance to win a lot of football games. We saw that under Ejiro Evero when they were actually playing at a really high clip, that they were able to turn the ball over. And I mean, so, and then I will say for the bad penalties, I mean, which is well, I guess tackling, I guess tackling sort of falls in line with discipline, right? So, I mean, it's just like, if they can show discipline, then the penalties and stuff will fall right in line. So tackling, discipline, and fours, the bad penalties.
There you go.
Yep.
I think the upfront defensive line pressure, and not just relying on the pressure coming from either the edges or straight blitzes. We haven't seen anything happening in the front line. We need Zach Allen to snap out of what's ever happening and play how we know that he can perform.
Absolutely. Got to be more sound on the front seven, man, especially again with the interior defensive line. Secondary has got to be more disciplined, which we saw some flashes of in the first half of the Washington game. They actually were pretty sound with their coverage and made Sam Howell hold on to the ball for just a tick too long, and that's what allowed some of the edge pressure to get home. So we saw some flashes of it. We just need to see more consistency. So for me, it's just consistency, and staying disciplined with your tackling, with your fundamentals, and not making any stupid penalties. I mean, that Nick Benito face mask, you could see Sam Howell's head turn. You can't have that shit.
Yeah,
I mean, and there's just other ones too. You cannot have these sloppy penalties. And more often than not, it's coming on third down when you're about to get off the field, man. You cannot shoot yourself in the foot like that.
Yeah. The Sam Howell face mask gave me really bad flashbacks to the Scott Frost face mask against the Kansas State, where his head literally turned all the way around. There's a great picture of that. It's what it gave me a flashback to. They can't have that. They can't have that.
Cam, did you extend the show just so you could throw a Nebraska reference at some point in?
Yes.
I at least have to say it once. For sure.
Yes, you did. So let's go into the Miami game. We'll do just a quick keys to a win, and then give a prediction, and then we'll head out. That means go.
All right.
Okay.
Keys to the win.
That means Cam, go.
Offense. Follow your first half game plan from last week and put some points on the board, because you're going to need to compete with this potent Miami offense who can score at almost at will. Another point is whether Jalen Waddle plays or not. If he doesn't, you're probably going to see PS2 on Tyreek Hill for the entire game at that point. And just all the things that we highlighted on as far as with the defense, we need pressure on Tua. We need to have him moving around. We need to hit him a few times. We need cannot give up stupid penalties to a team that can score as many points as the Dolphins can.
Yep.
Go ahead, Gage.
I think offensively, I feel like we need to establish the ground game and go on some long extended drives. And the best defense for this potent Miami offense is keep them off the field. So we need to establish long drives of our own. That's the key there, is get Javonte going, get Samaje going, and damn it, get Jaleel McLaughlin going. Give us some more Jaleel, damn it. I feel like this is a game where you need explosive playmakers to shine, and Jaleel McLaughlin is an explosive playmaker. So this is one where I feel like they may have been kind of saving Jaleel a little bit. Obviously, he got some looks in last week, or at least in the first half, but this could be the game where maybe they were saving Jaleel as their big secret weapon that they want to unleash to the world against Miami, or at least I sure hope so. But like Glenn alluded to, you got to make Tua Tagovailoa uncomfortable, because there's just going to be plays where our secondary gets roasted by their track team of weapons. It's just going to happen. So the key there is to make Tua uncomfortable and not allow him to get the ball downfield to that track team. So we've got to win in the trenches in this game, both offensively and defensively. And I feel like, again, we've got to keep that Miami offense on the sideline, and that starts with, on our own offense, being able to run the football and keep committing to running the football for all four quarters.
Yeah. I mean, Tua Tagovailoa is probably your MVP right now through 2 weeks. I mean, he's been Absolutely unreal. So I will say, of course, number one, they need to, establish a running game to what Gage was talking about. They need to establish the running game, which is going to sustain those long drives. And, even for that, they also need to continue with what they were doing, against Washington for 4 quarters. They can't exactly do it for, 2 quarters against Miami, because the moment that, they don't do it for 4 quarters is the moment you're going to be looking up and you're going to be down 28-17 or whatever the score is going to end up being. And you just dug yourself too far into a hole, into where you can't score 33 points, so you are absolutely going to have to. So obviously, that falls in line with, you can't fall in love too much with the big play, which is something that we saw last week. Because if you fall into the big play, you're going to be playing exactly into the Miami Dolphins' hands. And then the number 2 is that I will say turnover battle. They absolutely have to get some turnovers. With Tagovailoa being an anticipatory thrower, you absolutely have to think one play. It's sometimes hard. It's, when you play the Dolphins and McDaniel, but if you can think a play ahead and where that throw is going to be able to go, create some turnovers. And along with that, get to the quarterback. If they can get to the quarterback, I think that you'll see some real chance for the Broncos, to maybe create some of those opportunities and create some of those turnovers. And I will say, as far as, of course, the number one thing I am so excited to see is the number one thing I'm sure a lot of people would like to see, and that is Tyreek Hill against Pat Surtain. What I would want is, I don't want no Damari Mathis and Pat Surtain, being on, Tyreek Hill, taking, switching off and being, and Mathis is on him, Surtain is on him. I want Surtain on Hill every single time he takes that snap. I want mono Surtain on him, and I want him to be locked down for the entirety of that game. And if in fact he does lock up Tyreek Hill, then Surtain has not only established himself as the best corner in football, but arguably the greatest corner of all time if he's able to lock up Tyreek Hill. Because like you're talking about a performance that is Darrelle Revis against Megatron. Like that's the kind of performance that if he's able to do something like that, then Surtain will have definitely established himself as maybe truly one of the greatest corners we will have ever seen in just year 2.
Yep, I agree.
Sorry, Cam talks a lot, and I banned Bill. So
what are you gonna do, ban me?
I found out I can't unban.
Oh no.
Okay. So let's go. Let's go with the final scores.
Miami 42-35.
Damn.
I will say 35-24 Dolphins. I predicted that this was going to be a loss, if I'm not mistaken. So I have to kind of also ride with that. So I will say it's a loss.
Yeah, I think 38-31 Miami, unfortunately.
31-28 Denver.
Nice. You're such a homer.
Especially since he predicted a loss I was with Cam. I was continuing on with it. I would love nothing than for us to throw an upset here. That would be phenomenal.
I figure we all selected that the Broncos would win the first 2. They didn't. We got to make it up somewhere.
Yeah, I did have a Washington. I did have an L against Washington.
As much as we love Vic Fangio's defense, the defense in Miami has been shit. So
right, but also like in the vein of keeping our record, like I have them going 11-6. I have to at least keep the trend going for them to go 11-6. So I at least have to go accurate to what my prediction was, not being a total buffoon and switching my prediction and actually, predicting that they would actually win the game.
I mean, I'll switch my predictions if I get new information. I mean, if there's new information out there, I'll be more than happy to switch my picks. I mean, like if Tua was throwing, 7 interceptions through 2 weeks and, he only had like 1 touchdown. Sure, absolutely. I would be predicting the Broncos to win, but no.
PS2 and Simmons are due.
I hope so. I hope so, man. I think Simmons will get one. He should have had one against the Raiders, but freaking Austin Hooper out-physicaled him on that play. It was right up the seam. Simmons jumped the route, but Austin Hooper just snagged it from him.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else we need to talk about or discuss before we go?
Before your phone starts blowing up with Bill calling you.
It already has been.
So, guys, about trading away Justin Simmons.
Stop it! All right. Well, we appreciate every single person that's been in the chat except for Bill, because he's banned and can't see it anyway.
Bye, Bill.
We appreciate everybody that's been in the chat. We love you guys very much. You guys make a lot of fun. Special shout out to Clayton for sending the stars. We greatly appreciate it. It's absolutely awesome when you do that. We love it when you do that. Go check out all the shows in the MHRT network. We got shows Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then the neighborhood on Broncos game days. So check that out as well. We love you. We love Broncos country. We love the Denver Broncos, except when they lose. We don't like that. But
yeah,
we'll get there one of these days. Peace.
Even when you feel
Broncos
low,
County,
you can still
let's
go.
ride.
Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go, go, go.